Welcome to the If You Build It, Will They Learn podcast, a show dedicated to modern learning and development, with your hosts, Daniel Mendonca and Scott Babcock.
It's podcast day. Welcome to the show. This is If You Build It, Will They Learn? I'm Scott Babcock. I'm here with your co-host, Daniel Mendonca. Daniel, how are you today?
Scott, I'm doing well. As you know, vacation is going on currently. This is also my birthday week.
Woohoo! Happy birthday.
Getting old, but getting wiser as well.
That's what they tell you. I don't know if it's true. As someone who is older than you by at least a little bit, I don't know that I'm wiser than you.
Well,
my wife would probably tell you I'm forgetting more and more as the years go on too. So maybe that's a problem too. But that's all right. Hey, we're excited to come to you today. We have a fun topic. We are now in the month of July, so we're switching our focus over to inclusivity. We had motivation in June. We are now talking about inclusiveness and inclusivity within your workplace, within your L&D programs. We want to spend a little time today just talking about what does that mean and why might it be important for you, your business, your organization, and ultimately your learning culture. So without further ado, let's get right into it. All right, it's always good to start at the beginning whenever we bring on a new topic. So let's talk a little bit about what is inclusivity. What do we mean when we talk about this as we set up sort of the framework for the month? And very simply put, and I'm probably going to simplify it too much, I'm sure, but inclusivity is all about recognizing and acknowledging those within your organization, within your learning audience that might be marginalized in some way based on any number of factors, whether it be gender or race or geographic location, or has some form of barrier, maybe physical or mental, that might relate to how you're going to be able to present or have them take your content. And we need to make sure that we are aware of these things because the accessibility of your content needs to reach everyone. That's our goal whenever we're training, is not to leave anyone out of the loop of learning, to be able to include them in all of our processes.
Yeah, I think it's such an important topic to cover. I think with a lot of the different things that have gone around on in the world over the past 18 months and for a long time, and just how it also relates to your day-to-day as a corporation and your responsibility. And I think that's where a lot of the conversation today that trickles into the rest of the month we'll start at is what responsibility do you have as an organization? And I think when it comes to building a learning culture, inclusivity is a very important topic, and your responsibility is very high to make sure that a true culture that is strong with a great foundation and the ability to be successful includes everyone, and make sure that everyone is a part of the direction. So that this has to be a question you're asking yourself almost at every step of the process. So when we've talked about, speaking directly to the business owners and figuring out what the key goals and objectives are, you have to look at how you're including everybody. And when you break it down to the objectives that you're going to set to help achieve and work towards the company objectives, making sure you have a section that, or a moment where you ask the question of, how is this content being accessed and by who, and making sure everyone can access it is a very kind of important and strategic thing that you have to consider to be successful.
Yeah, when we talk with even our boys in baseball, and I'm going to kind of take it back to that really quick, but we talk a lot about intentionality. Are you doing things with a purpose? And I think when it comes to L&D and design and thinking about inclusivity, it's something you really have to be intentional with making it part of your process. Because it can be very easy to not think about others in your organization that may have different circumstances or a different approach, a different preference, a different need, because it isn't you. It's not your point of view. And sometimes that, if you're not being intentional to really make sure that's part of your process, to think about everyone in your organization so that they can have equal access to your content, it can be easy to kind of let things slip through the cracks or make assumptions that aren't accurate. So really making sure it's intentional as part of your program, as part of your process that gets you to the content, really is, I think, really important to make sure that you're meeting everyone's needs. And the reality is, this is strong for your business as well. So, one of the things to consider is that when you consider inclusivity in your content, you're likely to have better results from performance because people feel that the organization cares about them, is recognizing them, is caring for them in a way that ensures their success. That leads to better retention, better performance, better reviews and culture. So this is really something that impacts your business on a number of levels. It is tremendously important to make sure that your audience of employees, learners, facilitators all feel a part of the process and feel that they're cared for in that process as well.
Intention's a great word, Scott, that you used. And the reason why I want to go back to that is because, unfortunately, in a lot of moments in 2021, there aren't moments of inclusivity across organizations. People are discriminated based upon a lot of different things, and don't have the same opportunities because of a lot of different reasons, whether physical, mental disabilities, or who they are, where they're from, the color of their skin, etc. And as an organization, when you're asking the question and you're showing quality intentions, you build rapport because with that. And we've talked about wanting to put great, create an organization, or talked about cultural development around wanting people to want to master their role or grow within your company, and not just say what's in it for me and then I'm going to leave and find a different role. And things like this, inclusivity, and putting that out there and having the right intentions goes a really long way with employees that may deal with that on a day-to-day basis. The other thing I'll mention too is when we talk about inclusivity, we always talk on this podcast about including the learners in the conversation about what is to come. And I think that when you deal with a demographic or someone who has barriers, and you can just ask them, what you can do as an organization to help them, that sort of vulnerability goes a long way with the audience in creating inclusivity in your environment.
Yeah, I think that the reality of thinking through every potential accessibility concern that might exist is really difficult, and probably can lead to a bit of a rabbit hole. But having that feedback mechanism to take information back from your learners to build those strategies into place is a really great way to start to make sure you are addressing things that maybe you hadn't considered in the past, and finding ways to make it more accessible to everyone in your organization, and again, allow for a greater point of view as you design.
Starting the conversation can be difficult. I think that, and Scott, I'm not sure if you have any experience with this kind of in your past in learning roles, or I know you worked in store and retail for a while. From a manager perspective, we obviously both manage people now. When it comes to starting the conversation, I guess, do you have any thoughts around, or tips, I guess, in terms of the questions you might be able to ask?
Yeah, it is, there are certain limits, obviously, to any organization, what you're allowed to sort of infer or presume. And so I think, truthfully, where I have always felt like the greatest potential in these conversations comes in, it can't start here. That I think is the beginning thing, I guess I would say, from a leadership perspective. You have to build rapport with your employees. You have to treat them as people, I think, first. That sounds like sometimes a very oversimplified statement, but in larger organizations, it can be very easy to just see them as a part of the machine that is retail or business. And so I think if you start to build that rapport, that opens those doors to being able to have more candid conversations and letting them know that, again, your desires are for them to be successful, that you want to be able to remove any barriers that are there. And as they become more comfortable, they'll open up and tell you more about where they might have, again, an accessibility issue or a struggle with potentially content or accessibility to hardware or technology. And it can be daunting, especially if you're a new employee. Having that conversation with your leader, the last thing you want to do up front is tell them that there is some complaint almost, or that there's some trouble that they're having. I mean, we've all started a new job, and the last thing we ever want to do is feel that we aren't capable, or to show our employer that we aren't capable. And so that openness really doesn't come on day one and as part of an opening conversation. I think as a leader, it's all about understanding your employees. I'm a big believer in servant leadership, which is that as a manager, my job is to make you successful, not you make me successful. And so I think if you approach it from that perspective, and L&D can be the same thing, it can be a servant partnership, that L&D serves their audience, not necessarily that it's just about cranking out content and meeting deadlines. And if you approach it with that sense that, look, we're looking out for the best interest of our employees, we need them and want them to be successful and to have access, I think that opens the door to the conversation that can sometimes be a bit difficult. I'm not sure I answered your question 100%, but that's where I guess I would start.
I love that experience and that thought process. I find that, and there's so many different ways to look at this because, there's all sorts of different types of inclusivity or barriers that can be put up or the way this can be kind of portrayed. And I think it comes down to, like you said, there is I think the word I love around this topic is vulnerability, because we don't necessarily know how to start the conversation always, and we don't necessarily know who's involved. If you've never dealt or had an employee who has had a barrier, right? Or have never managed someone with a barrier, a disability of some kind or something that impairs them from operating in a certain way. It can be a difficult conversation that you don't really know how to start. I actually have an athlete that I coach who's dyslexic. So from a student athlete perspective, that makes a very unique situation. And I find myself consistently asking her how I can better help them when I send out documentation around our tactics or our shapes and our formations and all those things. I have to consider that if I send things out at noon to the team and we expect to talk about them at 5, that may actually not be enough time for her to digest and take in what needs to be taken in to prepare and have that conversation. So, but I feel like I've created a rapport where I can ask how I can help and let her know that, hey, if I misstep or I don't provide what you need, it's because I maybe didn't ask the right questions, but my intentions, going back to that, are where they need to be, and I think vulnerability helps with that, and having open conversations with those individuals is important.
Yep. Honestly, it just comes down to starting with the point that I want to be supportive. And I think what you mentioned there is exactly the intent, right? As a coach, your job is to obviously win games and to be strategic and all of that. But that comes from making sure your athletes feel supported. And it's no different in the L&D space. Letting those folks know that they are supported up front lets them express what they need or what they are maybe potentially struggling with, or where they're maybe finding barriers. And I think that's really the key, is if you feel supported, you're willing to be more open, and you know that the folks that you'd be conversing with and communicating with some of your needs, they're also starting from that place of support. And I think that is where it all begins. And I think that makes a great way for us to kind of wrap up our first topic for the month. You may have noticed we're trying something a little new. We're going for more of a small snippet style. Hopefully this has been a good conversation for you as well. I think it's a really, really important topic. But we will still wrap up the show the way we always do, with a moment of positivity. All right, let's get happy. It is time to share a little positivity with the world, a little something that brings us energy and excitement. I will go first. Tonight we have our first tryout for the first ever Tennessee Grind basketball team, youth 3rd and 4th grade, and then a youth 5th and 6th grade team. I'm really excited. So baseball has wound down. We had our last tournament last weekend. It was a fun one. We talked about the fact that the moms were coaching, and so that was a good time. But we are going to have basketball right around the corner. It technically doesn't start till November, but as we aren't just joining a local rec league, we are going to start a little team, have a little travel tournament style basketball. I'm really excited to see the boys that come out tonight and join up. So just shifting gears. There's still another baseball season in the middle in the fall, but fun to at least branch out a little bit and do something fun.
I mentioned it off the top of the show for me, Scott. I think that sounds great. And basketball, Tennessee grind, basketball, now it's just going to all kind of mesh together. So when you say the grind, I'm not going to know what sport you're talking about. So you're going to have to
Nope,
specify.
you're going to have to be more specific now. Yeah.
I hope you have the same sort of success on the court as you do on the diamond, because if not, like it's not going to be good for the brand, So
The brand, yeah, it's all about the brand. Yep.
Anyways, I mentioned it early on. This week's my birthday week. I'm just taking over. It's my whole birthday week. I am, however, feeling a little bit older for some reason this week than typical. I feel like 2020 didn't happen, so I feel like my 30th birthday was yesterday, and now all of a sudden I'm 32, and I'm like, what happened to 31? But feeling young, getting wiser. My family always takes good care of me on my birthday, so I'm excited to, it's always like, I know we talked about the holiday in May being the unofficial start of summer, but I always feel like, the July 1st, Canada Day, Independence Day, the 4th, and my birthday, nice kickoff to 2 solid months of summer.
It is hard to imagine that summer is kind of already in the middle. And look, my kids start school in less than a month. Their summer is always so short here, but they get long breaks during the school year. But yeah, they start school in less than a month now. So hard to imagine, but summer is winding down, but that's all right. We're going to enjoy every last drop of it we can. But yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed today's episode. That will do it for us today. I'm Scott Babcock. He's Daniel Mendonca, and we will talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the If You Build It, Will They Learn podcast. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. Join the conversation by emailing us at podcast@haylight.com. Find us on social media at Build It, Learn It, and be sure to check us out on the web at www.haylight.com. That's HALIGHT.com.